My name is Leah Offord. I was 34 years old. The day my mother tried to take my autistic son away from me in family court. Interesting thing about betrayal. Sometimes it arrives carrying church paperwork and smiling politely. My mother brought a CPS report. 4 witnesses. A pediatrician's evaluation. And my own sister willing to swear under oath that I was an unfit mother. What she did not bring was the truth. And what she did not realize was that I had spent 8 years working inside the exact legal system she was trying to weaponize against me. I knew how evidence worked. I knew how liars sounded under cross-examination. And most importantly, I knew paperwork leaves fingerprints. The judge only needed to read 1 page before calling for the bailiff. But honestly, the courtroom wasn't where this story really started. It started with oatmeal. Every morning at 6:50, I placed noise-canceling headphones over my son Emmett's ears. Same routine. Same timing. Because children with autism do not experience routine as preference. They experience it as safety. Oatmeal cut into squares. Never circles. Backpack zipped at 7:20. Bus at 7:42. If the bus was 4 minutes late, we drove. No exceptions. Interesting, honestly. Because consistency was the difference between calm and collapse inside my son's nervous system. Emmett was 6 years old. Brown eyes. Quiet voice. The kind of child who listened to the world sideways like he was decoding patterns nobody else could hear. He hummed when he felt safe. Pressed his forehead against my shoulder when he was overwhelmed. Lined up toy cars bumper to bumper whenever school had gone badly. Most people called him difficult. I called him fluent in a language they never bothered learning. His ABA therapist said he made more progress in 2 years than most children make in 5. Not because of miracles. Because structure works. And I built our entire life around structure. Color-coded schedules on the refrigerator. Blue for therapy. Green for school. Yellow for medical appointments. Red for IEP meetings. Binders organized alphabetically. Quarterly reviews filed by date. Interesting thing about single mothers raising autistic children. People think you're obsessive when you're actually surviving. My mother Diane never understood that. She was 62. Retired church administrator. Professional martyr. The kind of woman who corrected your grammar while pretending to pray for you. She had controlled every major decision in my life since childhood. She picked my ex-husband. Planned my wedding. Criticized my divorce. And after Emmett's diagnosis, she started auditing my motherhood like it was a failed government program. She visited my house carrying gifts and judgment simultaneously. Opened the refrigerator. Checked the bathroom floor. Looked inside medicine cabinets. Counted laundry piles. Interesting, honestly. Because my mother never visited people emotionally. She inspected them. Then came the photographs. That was new. She started taking pictures during visits. Not of Emmett. Of clutter. Dishes. Bathroom tile. Laundry baskets. At first, she thought I didn't notice. But honestly, I had spent 34 years watching her watch me. I always noticed. My father Gerald followed her lead the way he always had. Quiet man. Contractor hands. Voice only appearing after Diane decided what the family opinion should be. He repeated her conclusions louder so they sounded official. The warning came 7 months before court. Sunday dinner. Television too loud. Game show buzzers exploding every 15 seconds. Emmett pressed both hands over his ears immediately. Started humming. High-pitched. Panicked. The sound he made when his nervous system overloaded faster than he could regulate it. I reached for his headphones. My mother lowered the television volume exactly 2 clicks. 2. Interesting, honestly. Because some people perform compromise without changing anything meaningful. Emmett shoved his plate accidentally. Fork clattered onto the floor. My mother sighed dramatically. That sigh. The same sigh she used whenever my son behaved differently than church children she approved of publicly. I carried Emmett into the hallway. His breathing uneven against my shoulder. Gerald followed us. Arms crossed. Leaning against the wall. Then he said something that replayed inside my head for months afterward. You can't handle a difficult child alone. Interesting thing about rehearsed cruelty. It sounds too smooth to be spontaneous. I looked at him. Then at my son. Then back at my father. And honestly? Something cold moved through me in that hallway. Not anger. Recognition. Because suddenly, his words sounded prepared. Like a line practiced beforehand. I left dinner immediately after that. Buckled Emmett into the car. Drove home in silence. That night, after Emmett fell asleep beneath his weighted blanket, I sat alone in my kitchen replaying Gerald's sentence over and over. Not because it hurt. Because it sounded strategic. Then I thought about the trust fund. Interesting, honestly. Because money always sits quietly beneath family conflict long before anyone says it aloud. When Emmett was born, a medication error during delivery caused oxygen deprivation. 47 seconds. Long enough to permanently alter the trajectory of his brain development. The malpractice settlement totaled $640,000. Every cent placed into a special needs trust. Therapy. Sensory equipment. Future housing. Future care. Future survival after I'm gone someday. I managed the trust personally. Spreadsheets. Quarterly audits. Court reviews. Every receipt documented. And over the past year, my mother suddenly became very interested in the trust. How is the money managed? Should family have oversight? That's a lot for one person to control. Interesting questions, honestly. Because concern and financial reconnaissance sound almost identical at first. I answered politely every time. It's court-supervised. It's audited annually. It's none of your business. Eventually, she stopped asking aloud. But she never stopped calculating. The petition arrived on a Tuesday. Manila envelope. Family court return address. I opened it standing in the driveway beside unpaid utility bills and grocery coupons. Petition for grandparent custody rights. Filed by Diane and Gerald offered. The paperwork claimed my son needed a stable 2-parent household. Claimed medical professionals had concerns. Claimed family witnesses observed neglect. Claimed CPS had opened an active investigation. Interesting, honestly. Because the lies weren't even sophisticated. Wrong legal statute. Overturned case citation. Misspelled judge's name. Backdated filing timestamped on a Saturday when the courthouse was closed. Whoever filed it didn't understand family law. I did. And deep down, that terrified my mother more than anything else. Because she raised me to be useful. She accidentally raised me to be dangerous too. I called my boss immediately. Margaret Barrett. Family law attorney. 28 years undefeated in custody court. The kind of woman who could destroy someone politely while adjusting her reading glasses. She read the petition in 90 seconds. Then looked up calmly. Your mother's lawyer is incompetent. Pause. And your mother is lying. I sat across from her desk gripping the paperwork hard enough to wrinkle the corners. Can they take him? Margaret leaned back slowly. Interesting thing about good attorneys. They never offer fake comfort. Not if I have anything to say about it. Then she pulled out a yellow legal pad and said the sentence that changed everything emotionally. We need their phone records by Friday. Child Protective Services arrived 48 hours later. Interesting thing about retaliation. It almost always arrives wearing official badges. The knock came at 7:15 in the morning. Too early for visitors. Too early for neighbors. Exactly the kind of timing designed to make ordinary people panic. I opened the front door holding Emmett's lunch container in one hand. A woman stood on the porch. Short dark hair. County ID badge. Clipboard pressed against her chest. Professional smile. My name is Rosa Delgado. Pause. I'm with Child Protective Services. Interesting, honestly. Because even when you know the accusation is false, hearing those words still changes your heartbeat instantly. There's been a report concerning your son. I stepped aside immediately. Not because I trusted the system completely. Because I understood it. I'd spent 8 years inside family courtrooms watching what happens when frightened parents get defensive. Rosa walked through the house slowly. Kitchen. Bathroom. Laundry room. Emmett's bedroom. The sensory swing. Weighted blanket folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Color-coded schedules pinned beside the closet. Shelves organized with therapy tools labeled by category. Interesting thing about CPS workers. The good ones notice preparation faster than clutter. Rosa observed Emmett eating breakfast quietly. Oatmeal squares. Blue headphones. Spoon in his right hand, exactly the way occupational therapy taught him. She wrote something onto her clipboard. Then asked calmly. What are the headphones for? Sensory regulation. She nodded once. Wrote again. Age-appropriate accommodation. That sentence mattered. Because suddenly, the room stopped feeling like an investigation. It started feeling like documentation. Before leaving, Rosa paused beside the front door. Then lowered her voice slightly. Between us. Pause. The timing of this report and the custody petition is something I've noted. Interesting, honestly. Because professionals recognize weaponized systems faster than manipulative families expect. I locked the door after she left. Then sat on the kitchen floor for exactly 2 minutes. Not crying. Not collapsing. Just breathing. Then I called Margaret. 2 attacks in 48 hours. Margaret's voice stayed calm immediately. That means the petition was never the primary move. Pause. The CPS report was. Interesting, honestly. Because suddenly, my mother stopped looking emotional. She started looking strategic. Margaret filed 3 motions before noon. Motion to dismiss the petition. Motion for sanctions. Subpoenas for phone records. Every witness. Every petitioner. Every person attached to the filing. And while Margaret handled the courtroom, I handled the lies. Interesting thing about paralegals. We survive professionally by noticing inconsistencies nobody else bothers checking. My Aunt Pauline claimed she saw bruises on Emmett during a March visit. Problem. She lived in Tampa. I subpoenaed her airline records. Delta Airlines. Tampa to Philadelphia. March 28. 16 days after the date she claimed to see the bruises. Interesting, honestly. Because proving someone lied doesn't require emotion. Just timestamps. My cousin Derek claimed he observed me drinking excessively around Emmett multiple times. Interesting accusation from a man who hadn't entered my house in 2 years. Home security logs proved it instantly. 0 visits. Not one. Then came Brooke. My sister. The declaration hurt more than the others. Not because it was convincing. Because she signed it willingly. I witnessed the child crying while Leah ignored him. Interesting thing about betrayal from siblings. It always sounds strangely formal on paper. Brooke and I shared a bedroom for 16 years. I braided her hair before school. Helped her apply for college. Co-signed her first car loan because our parents refused. And now? She was signing sworn declarations calling me neglectful. Margaret discovered why during financial discovery. A letter from my mother to a mortgage broker surfaced. 6 weeks before the custody filing. It referenced upcoming family custody changes that would make Brooke financially stable enough for homeownership. Interesting, honestly. My sister sold her testimony for a down payment. I didn't call her afterward. Didn't scream. Didn't demand explanations. Silence made my family nervous. Always had. Because they relied on emotional chaos to stay in control. And honestly, I was done giving them emotional access. Then came the pediatrician's evaluation. That was the moment the entire case shifted from ugly to criminal. Dr. Harold Moss. Retired pediatrician. Golf partner of my father. His court-submitted evaluation claimed Emmett needed multiple consistent caregivers because a single mother couldn't adequately manage his developmental needs. Interesting conclusion. Especially because Dr. Moss retired 18 months earlier. Margaret subpoenaed the original records. The originals arrived sealed inside a chain of custody envelope. And the second I placed them beside the court version, I saw it. Different font spacing. Different paragraph alignment. One added paragraph inserted into the document later. The original read. The child is well cared for. The home environment is appropriate. The caregiver demonstrates strong understanding of the child's needs. The court version said the opposite. Interesting, honestly. Because my mother literally rewrote medical evidence using the same printer she used for church bulletins. Margaret deposed Dr. Moss 2 days later. Did you write this paragraph? No. Did you authorize anyone else to? No. Do you recognize the formatting? Pause. It appears to have been added using a home printer. Interesting silence afterward. Because suddenly, this wasn't just family conflict anymore. It was evidence tampering. Forgery. Fraud upon the court. And then the phone records arrived. Manila envelope. 47 pages. Time-stamped group texts between my parents, my sister, my aunt, and my cousin. 11 weeks of planning. 11 weeks coordinating false statements against me. Margaret read the first text aloud inside the conference room. Diane to group. We need to file before she gets suspicious. Another. Pauline will say she saw bruises. Then Brooke's message. What exactly do I say? I haven't been to her house since October. And my mother's response. Say you visited in January. Say the boy was screaming and she was hiding in the bedroom. Interesting thing about manipulative people. They always assume everyone else deletes evidence emotionally. I sat at the conference table staring at the transcripts while my entire childhood rearranged itself in my mind. Every inspection. Every criticism. Every fake concern. It was never about parenting. Never about autism. Never about Emmett. It was about $640,000 sitting inside a trust fund my mother believed she deserved access to. Margaret closed the folder slowly. Then said the sentence that made everything terrifyingly clear. This isn't a custody dispute anymore, Leah. Pause. This is conspiracy to commit perjury. The courtroom smelled like old paper and coffee burned hours earlier. Interesting, honestly. Because life-changing moments usually happen in painfully ordinary rooms. No dramatic music. No cinematic lighting. Just fluorescent bulbs humming above people about to destroy each other legally. Family Courtroom 4B. Tuesday morning. 9:02 a.m. My mother wore navy blue. Church lady navy blue. Pearl necklace. Soft makeup. The exact outfit of a woman trying to look trustworthy to strangers. Interesting thing about manipulative people. They prepare costumes for authority figures. My father sat beside her stiffly. Hands folded too tightly. Avoiding eye contact already. Brooke arrived carrying tissues before the hearing even started. Prepared tears. Prepared sadness. Prepared innocence. Margaret leaned toward me quietly. They know the phone records arrived. Pause. Watch how quickly people start protecting themselves. Interesting, honestly. Because conspiracies collapse from the inside long before judges finish speaking. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered exactly at 9:15. Gray hair. Sharp glasses. 20 years on the bench. The kind of judge who could detect manipulation before attorneys finished pretending. Everyone stood. Then sat. And honestly? My mother looked confident. That mattered. Because guilty people only appear relaxed when they believe emotional performance still outweighs evidence. Their attorney began first. Martin Keene. 61 years old. Sweating already. Interesting, honestly. Because weak lawyers panic once cases stop being emotional and become document-based. He argued instability. Single-parent stress. Developmental concerns. Specialized care requirements. Interesting phrase. Because people who know nothing about autism love using complicated wording to disguise ignorance. Then he called Brooke. My sister walked to the witness stand clutching tissues like props. She swore the oath. Sat down carefully. And immediately avoided looking at me. That mattered too. Because truthful people usually maintain eye contact longer than liars can tolerate. Brooke testified that Emmett often appeared emotionally distressed. That she witnessed me losing patience. That she worried about unsafe emotional conditions. Interesting, honestly. Because vague accusations survive emotionally until specifics arrive. Margaret stood for cross-examination. Calm. Yellow legal pad in one hand. Reading glasses low on her nose. And honestly? Watching Margaret dismantle lies felt almost surgical. Ms. offered. Pause. When exactly did you visit Leah's home in January? Brooke blinked immediately. Tiny hesitation. Huge mistake. January 10th. Margaret nodded once. Then slid a document toward the bailiff. Phone location records. Brooke's cell phone pinged inside Atlantic City January 8th through January 12th. Interesting thing about digital evidence. It doesn't care about family loyalty. Margaret spoke gently. So you were in New Jersey? Brooke swallowed hard. I may have confused the dates. Interesting adjustment. Because lies shrink the moment documentation enters the room. Margaret continued calmly. You also stated under oath that you observed Leah ignoring the child while he screamed. Yes. Would you explain why you texted your mother? Pause. What exactly do I say? I haven't been there since October. Silence. Immediate silence. The courtroom changed emotionally right there. You could feel it. Like oxygen leaving the room. Brooke's face lost color instantly. My mother looked toward her sharply. My father closed his eyes. Interesting, honestly. Because betrayal becomes much less glamorous once read aloud by court reporters. Did you send that message? Brooke whispered. Yes. And your mother responded. Margaret lifted the transcript. Say the boy was screaming and she was hiding in the bedroom. Correct? Brooke started crying immediately. Real panic now. Not performance. Interesting thing about weak conspirators. They collapse first. Judge Whitmore removed her glasses slowly. Ms. offered. Pause. Are you admitting this testimony was fabricated? Brooke looked toward our mother automatically. Still seeking permission. 32 years old. Still emotionally waiting for Diane offered to tell her which reality was acceptable. Then Brooke whispered. Yes. My mother stood immediately. Your Honor. Judge Whitmore raised one hand sharply. Sit down. Interesting honestly. Because powerful women recognize controlling women instantly. Brooke cried harder after that. Words tumbling out unevenly now. Mom said Emmett needed proper structure. Dad said Leah was too emotional. The trust fund came up repeatedly. Repeatedly. Interesting thing about greed. It always leaks into conversations eventually, no matter how carefully people disguise it initially. Then came Dr. Moss. Retired pediatrician. Golf partner. Nervous already. Margaret introduced both versions of the evaluation side by side onto the evidence screen. Original. Altered. Same signature. Different paragraph inserted afterward. Judge Whitmore stared at the documents for maybe 15 seconds without speaking. Those 15 seconds felt enormous. Because everyone in that courtroom understood exactly what they were looking at. Forgery. Court fraud. Tampering. Margaret asked one simple question. Dr. Moss. Pause. Did you authorize modifications to this report? No. Did Ms. Offord's parents ask you for language supporting custody concerns? Tiny hesitation. Then. Yes. Interesting honestly. Because elderly men always think partial honesty will save them once consequences arrive. My mother interrupted again. This is being misunderstood. Judge Whitmore slammed the file shut loudly. Mrs. Offord. Pause. One more interruption and I will hold you in contempt. Silence exploded afterward. Huge silence. The kind that rearranges power permanently. Then Margaret delivered the phone records. 47 pages. Highlighted texts. Planning timelines. False allegations coordinated weeks in advance. Judge Whitmore read silently for nearly 3 full minutes. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed normally. Interesting thing about real evidence. It destroys performance quietly. Then the judge stopped at one specific text. Diane. If Leah loses custody, we can petition for trustee oversight too. There it was. Finally naked. Not concern. Not protection. Money. $640,000 sitting behind my autistic son's diagnosis like bait. Judge Whitmore looked directly at my mother then. And honestly? I will never forget Diane's face in that moment. Because for the first time in my entire life, authority stopped working for her. Mrs. Offord, the judge said slowly. Did you file fraudulent custody claims in an attempt to gain access to the child's trust assets? My mother opened her mouth. Closed it again. Then tried the oldest weapon she owned. Emotion. Tears filled instantly. Voice trembling. We were only trying to help him. Interesting honestly. Because manipulative people always confuse control with care publicly. Judge Whitmore didn't blink. Bailiff. The entire courtroom froze. Even Margaret. The bailiff stepped forward immediately. And suddenly, my mother realized this was no longer family drama. This was criminal exposure, and why mother stopped crying the second the bailiff moved toward her. Interesting thing about performative emotion. It disappears instantly once consequences become real. The courtroom stayed completely silent. No whispers. No movement. Just fluorescent lights humming above the sound of my mother realizing authority no longer belonged to her. Judge Whitmore removed her glasses slowly. Then looked directly at Diane Offord like she was no longer seeing a grandmother. She was seeing evidence. Mrs. Offord. Pause. This court takes fraudulent custody filings extremely seriously. Interesting understatement, honestly. Because my mother hadn't just lied. She weaponized the legal system against a disabled child and his mother for financial access. The judge continued calmly. You coordinated false witness statements. You submitted altered medical documentation. You knowingly filed fabricated allegations with Child Protective Services. Each sentence landed like concrete. Heavy. Measured. Final. My father stared at the table the entire time. Interesting, honestly. Because passive people always believe silence protects them until consequences arrive publicly. Judge Whitmore turned toward him next. Mr. Offord. Pause. Were you aware these statements were false? Tiny hesitation. Huge answer. Yes. One word. Quiet enough to destroy 40 years of pretending he was merely uninvolved. My mother snapped toward him immediately. Gerald. Interesting thing about collapsing conspiracies. The loyal people disappear first. Judge Whitmore silenced her again. Then turned toward the county prosecutor seated near the back wall. I am referring this matter for criminal review. There it was. Not family conflict anymore. Not misunderstandings. Not grandparents concerned about stability. Criminal review. My mother looked stunned. Actually stunned. And honestly, I think that was the first moment Diane Offord truly understood something terrifying. The system she spent her entire life manipulating politely was no longer listening emotionally. Margaret stood calmly beside me. Hands folded. Expression neutral. But I knew that look. Victory without celebration. Because family court wins never feel clean when blood is involved. Then the judge looked at me. Ms. Offord. Pause. Your son remains fully in your custody. I nodded once. Couldn't speak immediately. Not because I was emotional. Because relief after prolonged fear feels physically exhausting. Like your body suddenly remembers gravity. Then Judge Whitmore said something I never expected. You appear to be an exceptionally prepared mother. Interesting, honestly. Because it was the first time anyone in authority acknowledged what survival actually looked like. Not perfection. Preparation. Structure. Persistence. Love translated into systems because my son's nervous system depended on them. My mother started crying again afterward while the bailiff escorted her from the courtroom. Real tears this time. Not strategic. Not polished. Just panic. Interesting thing about narcissistic people. They rarely collapse when they hurt others. They collapse when consequences finally interrupt control. Brooke avoided looking at me completely. She signed amended testimony 2 weeks later. Full retraction. Admission of coercion. Mortgage application denied afterward too. Interesting, honestly. Because lies tied to financial incentives leave permanent stains professionally. Dr. Moss lost consulting privileges with the County Mediation Network. Retired permanently 6 months later. And my father? He mailed me a handwritten letter 43 days after court. No return address. 3 pages. Mostly apologies disguised as explanations. I should have stopped her. Interesting sentence. Because weak men always describe moral responsibility like it belonged to someone else first. I never answered. Not out of cruelty. Because some relationships end the moment silence finally becomes healthier than reconciliation. CPS officially closed the investigation 13 days after the hearing. Unfounded allegations. Case dismissed entirely. Rosa Delgado called personally to tell me. Interesting, honestly. Because good social workers understand how devastating false investigations feel to decent parents. You did everything right, she said quietly. That sentence wrecked me emotionally more than the courtroom did. Because mothers raising autistic children spend years hearing what they're supposedly failing at. Too strict. Too accommodating. Too organized. Too emotional. Too protective. Interesting thing about special needs parenting. Everyone critiques the survival plan except the people awake at 2 a.m. holding the child through sensory overloads. Life became quieter after court. Not easier. Quieter. I changed the locks first. Then the emergency school contact forms. Then the trust oversight permissions. Every legal doorway my mother once used disappeared permanently. Emmett noticed the difference before I did. Interesting, honestly. Because children feel emotional safety structurally long before adults recognize it consciously. The humming stopped increasing during Sundays. He slept through more nights. Fewer meltdowns after family events. Then one afternoon, 3 months after court, he crawled into my lap during a thunderstorm, pressed his forehead against mine, and whispered something softly. House feels calm now. Interesting thing about autistic children. They often describe emotional truth more accurately than everyone else. I held him tighter after that. Not because I was sad. Because my 6-year-old son noticed peace before I gave myself permission to feel it. The trust remained untouched. Every dollar exactly where it belonged. Therapy. Education. Future housing. Future independence. Future safety after I'm gone someday. Exactly what the settlement intended. And honestly, that's what my mother hated most. Not losing access to the money. Losing control over the narrative. Because for the first time in my entire life, her version of me stopped matching legally. Church friends eventually learned fragments of the truth. Family whispers shifted. The concerned grandparents' story collapsed once subpoenas entered public record. Interesting, honestly. Because people protecting their reputations rarely survive documentation. The last time I saw my mother, she stood across a grocery store parking lot holding reusable shopping bags beside her car. Smaller somehow. Less certain. She looked at Emmett first. Then at me. Like she still expected guilt to pull me back eventually. It didn't. Emmett waved politely. Because kindness survived in him despite everything adults tried teaching him about conditional love. My mother started crying silently. Again. And honestly, I felt nothing except distance. Not hatred. Not victory. Just distance. Because some people spend decades confusing control with love. Until one courtroom finally explains the difference officially.